Okay, Boker Tov. A list of dedications today. Of course, as always, first and foremost, Nishmat Chai Avram ben Rachel Leah Meir Tzvi. Also, in honor of Marilyn Kamen, Rhonda's mom, who made Aliyah yesterday, officially, Zal Tov. Shavu Banim Likulam. Also, wishing refuah shlema to Yochevet Malka Bat Sarah Devra, and also to Neran Chaim ben Rachel Perla. It's Nisim. Okay, as promised, today what I'd like to do is spend literally just a few more minutes and finish up this tkufa, this time period, which brought us from the time of the Shulchan Aruch, rounding it off to 1500s till today, literally just a few minutes. The time period up until, and then we're going to get into the Pirke Avot, the time period leading up to the end of the writing of the Shulchan Aruch was called the Rishonim, literally is the first ones. And then the time period from then till today is called the Acharonim, or the latter ones, the last ones. Doesn't mean that we're last before anything else, just it's a way of separating different time periods.
Could that be a change about 200 years and not be Achronim?
It might be, I don't know, but the Achronim has been going for about 500 years now, so I don't know. You can have Achronim Chavivim. I don't know. Maybe it's Achronim because then Mashiach is coming now, so we'll have a whole new reality. That's not true. We'll have a different reality, not a new reality. Very different. So just to kind of give you a couple of signposts along the way. For those of you who learned Tanya with me, you may remember almost about a year and a half, 2 years ago when we started, I gave a little bit of background on Chassidut and talked about the fact that in the mid to late 1700s, there were two major revolutions going on. There was the American Revolution and the French Revolution. There was the third revolution, which was a Jewish revolution, because at the same exact time, and we've seen this in history, that the things happen in sequence, that something may happen, like you have what they call the quote Arab Spring, and that kind of rolled through the world, and then you have other things, the fall of communism and all that also. So you had a series of revolutions, and the Jewish Revolution was the birth of Chassidut with the Baal Shem Tov, living around the same time as the American Revolution, the French Revolution, all around the same, not exactly, but around the same amount of time. One person that is probably very important to mention, going back just a little bit, is the Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi was a false messiah. Ad Kedei Kach that many books were printed with a picture of him sitting on a throne with a crown, that he was the Mashiach. He was found to be a false messiah when, of course, he converts to Islam. Kind of flies in the face of being Mashiach. Not that many years later comes a man named Yaakov Frank, who's also thought to be the Mashiach, also debunked. He's not as well known as Shabtai Tzvi. And then the reason I'm mentioning is then comes along the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov wanted to bring this concept of Chassidut to the world, with bringing more joy and happiness and feeling into Judaism. And people were against it. They were called the Mit Nagdim because they were against it. Why were they against it? Because they felt that he was another false prophet. Because it's a very radical change, not very, but a radical change in Judaism. Of course, it turns out to be something very positive for the Jewish people. Over the next few hundred years, you have many names. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just kind of jump to more modern times. One of whom, of course, around that same time is the Shlomo Zalman from the Yadi, who was the founder of the Chabad movement, of the Chassidut Chabad. And it's also at the same time, the late 1700s, when he writes his magnum opus of Tanya, which is actually multiple books and not just Tanya itself. He also the reason I mention this is he also authored a Shulchan Aruch. Within the Chabad world, of course, there's the regular Shulchan Aruch we all use, but there's an additional Shulchan Aruch that sometimes Chabad halachot are different. And then he has what's called Shulchan Aruch Harav. Harav in this case means the Rav being Shlomo Zalman from the Yadi, also known as the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya. And so therefore there's another code of Jewish law that runs parallel to our Shulchan Aruch, very, very similar, but some distinctions made for the world of Chabad. Their name, I'm just going to list a few names that may sound familiar to Rabbi Nachman from Bratslav, the Tzemach Tzedek, who's again a part of the lineage of Lubavitch. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the founder of the Musar movement that we just finished recently, finished Mesilat Yesharim, which he basically brought to the world, which was written by the Ramchal. And then you come into an interesting time of the late 1800s, a man named Rabbi Yisrael Ganzfried. Let me just see when it was the year. Just a second. I want to make sure I get that. Shlomo Ganzfried. 1886. He passed away, and before that, he authored a book called the Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. Now, if you look at the Shulchan Aruch, it's many, many volumes with all kinds of commentaries, and he decided there needs to be a smaller version so that the layman, because again, we're talking the 1800s, education was always important to the Jewish people. However, not everyone was educated, so they needed to have something shorter, more to the point, without all the commentaries. And there was a race to write a Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. I don't remember the name of the other person, but there were two people at the same time writing Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. He won, so he became more famous. Is that to the point where I don't remember the other name? So I could easily find it out, but we'll do that another time. The Malbim, the Chavetz Chaim, you're talking now the late 1800s and working into the early 1900s. Chavetz Chaim, as I mentioned last week, wrote the commentary on the first volume of Shulchan Aruch, which with his commentary known as the Mishne Brura. Jump ahead to the early 1980s. There was a volume that came out called Badei HaShulchan, which is a commentary on specifically Hilchot Nida, is laid out exactly like the Mishnah Brura, and he uses the word Mishnah Brura and Biur Halacha, which are the titles that use the different parts of the commentary of the Chavetz Chaim. Had a bit of a war with the family of the descendants of the Chavetz Chaim, that how dare you use the exact word titles for that, because that's Chavetz Chaim. The book is still in print. It came while I was learning Smicha. It came out. First Smicha came out. But in any case, you have names, the Chazon Ish, and you have the Ben Ish Chai, hundreds and hundreds of names of people who are involved not only in passing down Torah, but also writing halachot, coming to conclusions. Because also, again, this is not Jewish history class, otherwise this would be a much longer discussion. All the different segments of Judaism, which are all under the rubric of Orthodox Judaism, you have Hasidut, and you have multiple types of Hasidim, each with their own nuanced approach to how they get to halacha. And you have Chabad, of course, which is also a form of Hasidut. You have Sfaradim, and you have Ashkenazim, and you have, and within the Sfaradim, you're about at least eight or nine different subcategories. So there have to be there are various approaches in certain areas in halacha. Ultimately, most of Jewish world, the Orthodox Jewish world, looks at the Shulchan Aruch, written again by combination Rav Yosef Karo / Rav Moshe Yisraelish, which we talked about last week, and I will take a breath in a minute. Yes, well, as the main source of halacha. Yes. That's a good question. Right. So they will still learn, because they also, it's important to know what each Edah does. Very often I'll find, like after davening in the morning, Rav Itzik Mizrahi is the Rav at Mishkan Shoshana where I daven, so it's Dvar Halacha at the end of davening, and when he'll read the Halacha, and he'll still say, Avalachenu b'nei Ashkenaz do such and such. So yeah, it's very normal to do that. I've never seen a copy of the Shulchan Aruch without the Ramah, because you're talking about it have to be very old and be only in early days of the printing press. But no one wears the yeah, I would say, generally speaking, I don't even have a copy of it in my house. Probably should, but I don't. But yes, it's Shulchan Aruch Harav. I would say in the most of modern times right now, the biggest revolution, in quotes, in the area of halacha, as far as authorship, has been the set Pninei Halacha. Pninei Halacha has in many cases supplanted the learning of Mishnah Brura in most schools, and Kitzer Shulchan Aruch, and sometimes Shulchan Aruch by Rabbi Eliezer Melamed, Har Bracha. It is magnificent because it takes into account hundreds and hundreds of modern day issues and questions that come up, which obviously couldn't have been dealt with even just as recently as 100 years ago with the Chavetz Chaim. So what we've done pretty much is brought up to date all of the major milestones. I took this out the first day, again, thanks to Adam Berger for loaning this to me. I'll pull this up so you can see it on the screen also in a minute. Do this like it's a map. I can't clear it. Okay. This is what we've done basically in the last 3.5 classes. Okay, obviously this would take years if we're just focusing on this. Okay, because it would include various computer also. It would include various biographies, background, history to the people. Why is it that certain Rabbanim have an approach one way versus another way? There's obviously their influences, communal influences, religious influences. So, Adkan. Okay. Bezrat Hashem, my goal is that when I finish my Tfilah class, at least another couple of years, then I'm going to go to history class. I hope that's the plan. Bezrat Hashem, should all live and be well. Call me after all. So, I am going to get started now with keep saying Mishne with Pirke Avot. It requires just a little bit more of an introduction before we start. And then we're going to start and take a look at the first Mishnah, and then I'm going to challenge everybody here to do something. Don't worry, I'm not going to call it. I mentioned along the way when we were talking about Mishnah, we're talking about the writing the Mishnah, that Pirke Avot, and just Avot. We call it colloquially the chapters of the ethics of our fathers, but it's really just Avot. That's the official name of it in the Mishnah. Is Mishnayot. It falls in the end of the Seder Nizikin, damages / torts, because of the fact it's a Ben Adam Lechavero issue. It's man to his fellow man, how we treat each other. It is the only Mishnah, only set of Mishnah, and all Mishnayot that has no halacha at all. There's no halacha in it at all. It's all ethics. It's all how to conduct yourself. Okay, you say that you have to be nice to your people, but I'm not really saying it. It's not like that this rabbi says this is what you're supposed to do for this character trait. It doesn't work that way. This is 100% ethical. How to act between you and yourself, you and your fellow man, and ultimately also between you and Hashem. Oh, very good question. I was hoping someone was going to ask that. The question was, when did it become customary that people began to read it on a weekly basis? So that's it's a 2-part answer. I have to start with the part before that question. Originally, when Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi wrote Avot, it was 5 chapters. I have it written down here, approximately the 6th, 7th century, there became a custom at the time of the Gaonim. Remember we talked about the Gaonim, like the High Gaon, of Sadia Gaon. At that time period, I'll explain in a second. It became, the idea came up that on Shabbat afternoon, why Shabbat afternoon? We'll see. To start to read Pirke Avot on the Shabbatot from Pesach to Shavuot. Okay? Now, the only problem with that is that there's 6 Shabbatot. There's only 5 chapters. So what do? So the 6th chapter of Pirke Avot, I'll give you more of a background on this when we get the 6th chapter of Bezrat Hashem, Chamsa. And just understand that around 1100 years ago, a new chapter was added. And the reason, if you want to, you can take a look, you'll see the beginning of the chapter is Shanu Chachamim Bilshon, Shanu Rabbanan Bilshon Chachamim, something to that effect. You just take a quick look, the exact word. Shanu Chachamim Bilshon HaMishnah. The rabbis taught in the phraseology of the language of the Mishnah. What it means is that they took additional statements of various Rabbanim, added it as an additional chapter to round it out to all 6 Shabbatot between Pesach and Shavuot that they should be read. Again, I don't want to give more background than that right now. But the question is, wait a minute, what do you mean between those 6? I thought that we read it from Pesach until Rosh Hashanah, because you're Ashkenazi. Ashkenazim read it every Shabbat between, it's a custom, it's not a requirement, on the afternoon of Shabbat. After Mincha usually is the time to do it. Again, the why I'll get to in a second. Sfaradim only read it those 6 Shabbatot. And usually they'll do it in shul after davening's over, out loud. So there were different approaches, different customs in how that was done. So the question would be, again, why specifically Shabbat? Why Shabbat afternoon? So the very, very, very first word of the first Mishnah and all Avot is Moshe. Right? Moshe, we're going to see in a minute, but Moshe received Torah from Har Sinai. Moshe is supposed to have died Shabbat afternoon. So in honor of Moshe, at the time when he died on Shabbat, we learn Pirkei Avot. There are many communities that have shiurim and Pirkei Avot on Shabbat afternoon. Someone years ago when I was in Chicago suggested I do something. I said, Chicago could rain anytime. It's not like here. He wanted to do Pirke in the park. Yeah, which I've heard, it wasn't original. It wasn't his original. He had heard it from other cities to learn Pirkei Avot in a park. The kids can play and the adults can learn. I didn't do it. It's also difficult acoustic-wise. I've actually done a couple of times on Shabbat. I went out to the park and made a quick siyum for something and finished some Gemara. It's not easy to do in a park. So in any case, so again, different customs arose over the actual reading of Pirkei Avot, different Ashkenazim and Sfaradim. I told you about the 5 chapters versus 6. In order to understand what that 6th chapter is, again, I'll get you much more detail later, is what the Mishnayot we see in Mishnah are called Mishnah. The other teachings of rabbis that were not included in the official Mishnah are called Braitot or Braita. It's singular. It's Aramaic for a teaching. Actually means outside. It means outside because it wasn't included in the Mishnah. It has the same power as the Mishnah. So sometimes you learn Gemara, you'll say, Tanya, we learned in a Braita. Just as an aside, when you learn Gemara, part of the shorthand of Gemara is the way a question is asked also tells you more about it. When it says Tana, means we learned in a Mishnah. Tanya, we learned in a Braita, meaning it's not going to be found in the actual Mishnah, but it's going to be somewhere else in the corpus of the Jewish of writings. So they took who did it? Again, we'll wait till down the road, but took a whole bunch of different Braitot, compiled them, so there was a 6th chapter to Pirkei Avot. Let's get started. Okay. Now, in most printings of Pirkei Avot, even in Kahati Mishnayot, which I purposely brought, you will see that there's a Mishnah that comes before the first Mishnah. I'm going to read it to you and not going to make much more than one comment for a reason. Okay. Because the first Mishnah is not this. This first Mishnah we're about to look at, it says, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek l'olam haba. It's really the first Mishnah in Parak 10 of Sanhedrin. Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek l'olam haba. Every Jew has a portion of the world to come. For it says, V'amech kulam tzadikim. Your people are all tzadikim. L'olam yeshu aretz netzer mata'ai ma'aseh adai hitpa'er. I'm not even going to translate. This is the introduction to every parak of Pirkei Avot. Not only that, if you look at the end of the first parak in many of your printings, I don't know if you did it here, you'll also find another statement, which is not here, which is Rabbi Chananya ben Kasher Omer Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakot Yisrael. What is that all about? There's this very famous statement. Rabbi Chananya ben Kasher made. Hashem wanted to give us all kinds of merits, so He gave us lots and lots of mitzvot. So whenever we say Pirkei Avot, the custom is you start with that all Jews have a place in the world to come, and you end the chapter with Rabbi Hanani ben Kasher Omer. Why? How did that happen? We're going to wait till we get to the end of the first chapter to discuss it, okay? Because I want to do both, because it's basically bookended with 2 other statements, which are not at all part of the Mishnah, okay? So let me just do, now what I want to do is as follows, which will start with a challenge to you. I'm going to read the Mishnah, first Mishnah. I'm going to translate it into English. If you have a commentary in your books, don't look at it. Just look at the English at the most, because the challenge requires you to think. Sorry, Mark. You'll do your best. Okay. Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. Moshe received Torah on Har Sinai. And he transmitted it to Yehoshua. Yehoshua is Zikanim. Yehoshua then transmitted it to the Zikanim, the elders. Who's Kenim leNevi'im, the elders transmitted it to the prophets. Nevi'im misaru l'anshei knesset hagdolah. The prophets transmitted it to the people of the Great Assembly, which we've talked about the Anshei Knesset Hagdolah before. Heim amru shlosha dvarim. Anshei Knesset Hagdolah said 3 things. Number 1, hevu metunim badin. Be slow or punctilious, careful. Just going to right now just leave that kind of inexactly translated when it comes to law. You should make many students. And you should make a fence or protective measure for the Torah. Okay, that's just the plain literal translation, what it says here. Very nice. I want people to now take the opportunity. I want you to ask me at least 7 questions about this Mishnah. Basic, as like, wait a minute, why this, why that, or how come this? Just look at it for a minute. When I teach in school, when I teach students, I tell them, when I start teaching Gemara, I say, I want to prove something to you. Now, there's no Gemara on Masechet Avot. But when we teach Gemara, I always say, how can the Gemara, how'd they come up with all these questions? I said, I will bet you all that you're going to think of at least 10 questions that the Gemara thinks of. So I put a mission on the board, we read it, and they ask me all these questions. That's exactly what the Gemara talks about. Judy, question. 1 per person. Excellent. Why isn't God mentioned here? The Torah to Moshe. Right. Excellent. What else? Yes.
Why is it your people
You're talking about the Kol Yisrael part. I'm not. I'm talking about the first Mishnah now. Look at the first Mishnah. It says Kol Yisrael, where it says Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. Right. Okay. Think critically. Think like, how come?
Is this
Why?
for the shelf team or the people?
What do you mean?
Is it for the judges or?
Is what for the judges?
This Mishnah, is it directed towards?
Good question. You're talking about Havim Utunim Badid. You should be careful in law and making decisions. It sounds like maybe it's only, this mission is really only geared to one kind of people. Paid, possibly. Good. Anything else?
So
Yeah.
is just unshaked that.
Yes. It's only on a Sheikh Knesset Hagdolah, but there should be another question there you should ask. Don't worry, I'll let you know all the questions, but why to go step by step to this group? Okay, good. Very good. Why those 3? What, they didn't say anything else? On Sheikh Knesset Hagdolah spans hundreds of years. That's all they said? Okay, good. I'll give you another few seconds. What do you mean by offense? Protective measures. Like, for example, muktzah. Muktzah is not a sword for the Torah. The rabbis made it so that you wouldn't come to write on Shabbat, for example. So therefore, you can't move a pen. Preventative measures, protective measures. Yes, Judy.
Many definitions.
Correct. Very good. Oh, very good. Very, very good. It's a lacking, a big lack in definitions. Zikanim. What is zikanim? Yes. Huh? Oh, did it come from Hashem? Where'd it come from? Okay. Right. Very good. Okay. So I'm gonna kind of enlighten you with a few questions, some of which came up, some did not. And this, by the way, is a really good lesson in Mishnah. Not Gemara right now. I mean, eventually Gemara, but you read something. Now, if you're reading again, like I said at the class the other night, like you're reading a John le Carré novel, right? I don't know why I picked him, but you don't have to say, why do you use this word and not that word? Was he okay? That's not how people write books. But when it comes to Mishnah, you don't interpret it like Torah, because we say there's not an extra word, an extra letter, anything Torah. In Mishnah, the way that things are written by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the way it was edited, is to leave us with thinking more. It's not, don't take what it says just on face value. You have to almost always look below the surface. Let's just take a look. First of all, we know in general this Mishnah is introducing us to the topic of Masorah. Masorah means the transmission of Torah from generation to generation. Now, you're Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. You have to decide where you're going to put this Mishnah. Where would you put it? Where might you forget Nizikin or Bracho? I mean, Zeraim. Where in this whole vast 4,000 plus Mishnah would you stick it? You'd put it in the last one. Why the last one? But what if you don't get to that last Mishnah? First one. It would make logical sense to start off with, okay, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, let me explain to you how we got here. Should be the first Mishnah of all Mishnah, not when do we daven say Shema at night? It would sound like it should be the first thing. Next question. Judy asks, where's God's name? It should say Moshe Kibel Torah Me'Hashem, not me Sinai. And by the way, he didn't get it from Sinai. He got it on Sinai, bes Sinai. He didn't get it made. The mountain didn't talk to him. There's no recording anywhere that Har Sinai spoke. So what does it mean he got it from Sinai? Next question. Look at the verbs. Moshe kibel. Moshe received the Torah. Umsaruha, and he transmitted it. There's no more kiblu. It's now received, and then it's transmitted. Why isn't it that Moshe received and they received, or Moshe received a transmission from Sinai and they received the transmission? Why change the verbs?
There's also a huge empty space between receiving and passing on.
There's a big empty space between receiving and passing on. Yes, there's definitely a significant difference. That's going to come into play.
Interpretation or
no, that's okay. So that I'm going to address right now. If you're saying there's no mention of interpretation, when we're talking about whether it's receiving or transmission, it means exactly that. Not just the words. It means that everything that went with it. Okay, and that's going to actually help us understand the difference. But if you take a look at the Mishnayot, go to Mishnah Daled for a second. And don't even bother with what it means. Okay? Remember we talked about, this is why I did the background. Remember we talked about the time period at the beginning of the Mishnah of the Zugot, right? That the pairs. So here you have one of the pairs. Yosei ben Yoezer ish Tzreda, Yosei ben Yoezer from Tzreda, Yosei ben Yochanan ish Yerushalayim, and his pair, his match in that group was Yosei ben Yochanan, Kiblu mehem. We're back to the word Kiblu. It doesn't say that the generation before passed it on to them. It says they received from the prior generation. And by the way, you're going to see that multiple times after this. So wait a second. No, it's not. It is plural because they received it. They kiblu. They received it. That's fine. But it starts off like this. It starts with the verb Moshe received. Then it jumps into the verb transmitted to transmission, and then all of a sudden it goes back to and they received it from them. Well, be consistent. Okay. Obviously, there's a reason. Okay, we're going to see that. Also, there's one more. Kiblu is more like a kinyan or an acquisition. Okay. You're sort of on the right track. Hashem, no, but we could say, but why can't we just say Moshe, Hashem, Moshe Kibel, sorry, what we say, Masar, Hashem Masar Torah le Moshe. But why does it mean that in the next generation that it means that they took it and accepted it? I understand. So why doesn't it use the word Kabbalah all the way through? Why did it go back and forth with the terms?
Because once you rebel, you can't just keep it for yourself.
But doesn't everyone have to? That's what you're asking, right? Doesn't everyone have to accept?
Everyone needs to accept. That's why we call Shavuot is also known as the time of Kabbalat Torah, right? So first of all, Hashem's name is not even mentioned here, which sounds very weird. Like, where did Hashem? Well, the Torah is divine. It came from Hashem. Okay, well, it doesn't say that. Okay, it's not a matter of singular or plural. It's a matter of a different verb. Verb 1 is received. Verb 2 is transmitted. Receiving is stronger, maybe. Okay. Good. What else?
Is process.
Good. All these are good. I like the questions, like the suggestions, the ideas.
And then you like you can't be down.
Right. So my Torah's hand me down. I knew that didn't fit me now. They regifted it. Yes, we gifted the Torah. Very good. Okay, so let's get some of the answers. They're not going to be necessarily in the order I asked them. The first one I think I asked was, why is this Mishnah here and not the very beginning? Right? It's like the introduction to the Masorah. So keep in mind, until then, everything was transmitted verbally. So he already knew this background. He's just now putting it into writing. The reason he put it specifically here is that we could say, okay, I understand that Hashem transmitted to Moshe, just using that word right now, all the halachot and all the Torah and everything. When it came to character traits, that's something you learn and you grow in. Even that was part of the transmission to Moshe on Har Sinai. That was also the midot, our character traits, how we treat each other, how we treat Hashem, so to speak, how we treat ourselves, because that's all found in Pirke Avot. Even that, the ethical ideas were transmitted along with Torah on Har Sinai. But you raised a question, I think, Judy, of like, what does it mean? We're missing definitions here. It says Moshe Kibel, again, put aside the question of Kibel and the receiving and the transmission. He received the Torah. What's the Torah? So when I was doing this background for the last few weeks, I kind of basically touched on it just for a little bit. There are many opinions. Remember, we're Jews, so there have to be many opinions. One opinion is he got the Torah as it was in existence until that point of history, and then the rest of what he received was just letters, and those letters came to form words as time went on in a miraculous fashion. But that's what he got. What we came to know as the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the 5 books of Moses. That's what one opinion, basic, including, of course, all the verbal explanations. When it says tzitzit, it says tefillin. It doesn't use the word tefillin in Torah, but it says tefillin or whatever it is, a sukkah. Moshe learned all that. That's the basic assumption from everybody. At least that, the written and the oral law. There are others that say that he also was able to receive everything that was going to be even in the Gemara later on. Proof being from the word ish dat lamo in beginning of Zot HaBracha, that the word also makes the word Talmud when you put the letters and mix them up, come the word Talmud. Bottom line is we don't know exactly, we know at least what he got, which is the entire Torah Shabichtav, the Mishne Torah, and Torah Shebal Peh, the verbal explanation of everything in the Torah. Did it mean also that he saw the She'elot and Shuvot that were going to come up in modern times about using electricity on Shabbat? Maybe. I don't know. We'll have to ask him. He's going to be so busy. I really want to know what these people look like. You know, we all have pictures in our mind, I imagine, of various individuals, and sometimes it's colored by Charlton Heston, right? I don't know. Maybe it looks that way. Maybe it'll look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know. But I'm wondering if they're going to come back like, hello, my name is. Hi, my name is Moshe. Nice to meet you. No, I'm the original Moses. Yeah. Remember the horns? Okay. So why doesn't Hashem's name get mentioned here? Let's think for a second. I'm going to give you a hint. The Haggadah of Pesach. And by the way, this idea just popped into my head now. What's missing in the Haggadah? Moshe's name is not mentioned except in a by the byway in a pasuk that's quoted. It's not. Moshe was an integral part of the Exodus. His name's not even mentioned.
Same in Megillat Esther.
Megillat Esther is a different reason why Hashem's not mentioned, which is why, because it Hester Panim, and it's he's hiding his face, and everything happens benistar, happens hidden. I said to a student the other day, there's an expression in Hebrew, say a tzaddik nistar, which means a hidden tzaddik, that we don't even know he's a tzaddik. I said, you're such a tzaddik nistar, even Hashem doesn't know you're a tzaddik. He didn't understand what I was saying. I was actually saying it in a very sarcastic way, so right over his head. Anyways, so Hashem's his name's not mentioned. Why did when we were kids, we learned at some point in our lives, when we were learning about Torah, we learned, why did Hashem give the Torah on Har Sinai? Because, come on, so it's the most anav, it's the most low mountain, because it's to teach us we get Torah, we should be humble about we have, humility. So now why is Hashem's name not mentioned? It's the humility of Hashem. There's after davening and Motzei Shabbat, there are multiple paragraphs, which most people don't say. Arshel used to with them, whatever, long story, but whatever. And part of that refers to the humility of God. Now, I'm pretty sure God has what to boast about, right? But Hashem himself, so to speak, is humble. The lack of Hashem's name being on there is indicative of the humility of Hashem. We have this throughout history. I'm going to give one example. Who is probably the greatest commentary on Torah ever? Rashi. That stands for Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. It also has come to mean Rabban Shel Yisrael, the Rabbi of Israel. If you open, I'm going to give you two examples here with Rashi that'll explain what it means to be an anav. When you learn the very, very first Rashi in the Torah, it says there, why does the Torah start here? It should start, it's not a storybook, it should start in Pirke Yud Bet and Shemot, when it starts talking about the Exodus, the birth of Israel. It's not a storybook. So he says, because over the centuries, there can be nations going to say, that's our land, not your land, you stole it. I know no one's ever said that to us. I might have heard it somewhere in a TV show once. And then you can say that the least timatem that you're ganavim. So therefore, the Torah starts here to say Hashem created the world and it's His, and He will give the land to whomever He wishes. Very nice. But the beginning of His explanation says, "Amar Rabbi Yitzchak." Okay, he quotes a Rabbi Yitzchak. Said, "Who's this Rabbi Yitzchak?" It was his father, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. He's quoting his father. He starts off the entire commentary on Torah with Kibud Av V'Em. I learned my Torah from my father. The old joke is, who's the first person in the Chumash with Rashi? His dad, right? So he's saying, like, his brilliance. He's giving a hat tip, so to speak, to his father. But before he was Rashi, he wasn't known as Rashi. He wasn't even known as Rabbi Shlomo. He was known as Kuntres. What's Kuntres mean? Pamphlet or notebook. That's a pretty weird. Hey, there's my buddy Kuntres. Here's my buddy notebook. Why? Because when he first started writing as a youth, he started writing commentary on the Torah. He wasn't anybody. He didn't want to say, didn't know if what he was writing was good. So he wrote in his notebook with no name he left on his teacher's desk. And he kept doing it until he finally, I don't know if he was discovered or they asked who's been doing this. So he didn't want to attach his name to it even, because it's so humble. You'll very often see the commentaries. When you have a commentary on a commentary, it's called a supra or a super commentary. It means a commentary on a. So the super commentaries on Rashi will very often say Kuntres Omer. It's very often you'll see that in the Ramban and other commentaries. The Mizrahi is a commentary on Rashi. You'll see Kuntres Omer. You even see in Tosfot, where in some cases the grandsons of Rashi, it says Kuntres Amar. The notebook said. Again, it's a hat tip to his extreme humility. So again, it's Misinai, not from Hashem. But why Misinai, not Bisinai? So this is I don't usually do gematria because I'm not much into gematria, even though sometimes it's pretty cool. Mem is 40. What does that have to do with Sinai? 40 days and 40 nights. At least once, at least twice, maybe 3 times. He was up there 40 days and 40 nights. So that's the indication. Sinai, because also humble, again, leaving Hashem's name out. But let's talk a bit about this difference between lekabel and limso, to receive and to transmit. I think I have a brain that works well enough that if you were trying to teach me something, there are many things I can't. There are many things I still, Bezrat Hashem, will learn, whether it's in the area of Torah or not Torah. There's certain topics I love. I love astronomy. I love history. There's a lot of stuff I love that doesn't necessarily directly go to the core of Parshat Shavua. And I do think I have the capacity to learn a lot of stuff, but I also know that I don't have the capacity to learn certain things. You can sit here and teach me till you're blue in the face, deep mathematical ideas. Yeah, physics. I keep coming back to physics always, right? Maybe I can get past physics, but getting beyond that in quantum mechanics and all this other stuff, my brain doesn't do that. There's just so much I can receive. There's a certain amount. Moshe Rabbeinu, who was not only a Nav Mikol Adam, but the most humble, was also our greatest Navi. But Hashem could not enable him to be Mekabel, to receive everything, because that would put him on the level of God. We know that there are 50 levels of Binah, 50 levels of understanding, 50th being the top, which no human being could get to. Moshe was able to get to the 49th. To receive, every single human being, because of the fact of who they are, is that has what they have, their capacity in their brain, can receive up to X amount, and the brain just can't do anything after that, right? I have tried multiple times to start the basics of the language of Kabbalah, with the certain words and expressions, and then using that to understand, reading the beginning of the Zohar. It goes in one ear, not the other. I just can't grasp it. I'm in good company, because it says that when the Balatanya was trying to, Balatanya, the Ramah, I forgot, one of the great, maybe it's the Ramah or Yosef Karo. I think it was Yosef Karo. Every time he was being taught Kabbalah, he fell asleep. And he says, I'm not meant to learn Kabbalah. This is Rabbi Yosef Karo. Okay. So every human being, how Hashem created us, has the ability to accept and receive in their brain X amount. So Moshe accepted everything he was able to accept. But now he has a job. He has to limsor, he has to give over everything he learned. He can't just say, well, I don't think you could accept this. I'm going to do my best to give everything over that I can. How you accept it and what you do with it, that's going to be on you now. But I have the responsibility. Let's say, for example, as a teacher, I have, use numbers. There's 100 pieces of information I have to transmit to you in order for you to know what to do. I say, okay, I'll give him 87. I'll give him 87 because I don't feel like giving the rest. Now I've set you up for failure. I have to give you 100 pieces of information. How you coalesce that, what do you do with it? That's going to be on you to deal with. Good example. I teach very often. I teach chatanim, bridegrooms before they get married, halachot of Hilchot Nida. No matter of fact, right after this, I have a class. And I learned a lesson a long time ago. I may have told this story. I'm not going to go into it again. That even though I'm teaching somebody who they're already living together, they've already been sleeping together, and whatever it might be, I still start from scratch. And even though they may not be keeping the mitzvot how they're supposed to be 100%, I tell them, my job is to teach you what I can, everything I know. Again, what you do with it's going to be to you, but my job is to teach everything. So Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem could not give him more than he could receive, because Hashem made it that Moshe couldn't receive more than that. But once he had it, then he had the responsibility to transmit everything he had. But wait a minute, so how come then it jumps back to Kiblu? Why in the in fourth Mishnah then goes back to the expression of received? Well, that we're going to have to wait to see. That I'm not going to answer just yet. Stay tuned, right? Who are the Nevi'im? Who are the Zikanim? So very often in the Torah, you see that Hashem says to Moshe, Esfali Shivim Miziknei, so gather to be 70 elders. It's not them. It was not them. The Zikanim were the time period of the Shoftim. Okay, the book of Shoftim goes approximately 360 years, 390 years. I don't remember. I don't keep that in my head. It was over 300 years. If someone remembers, fill in the blank. So that was the generation. So Yoshua is followed by, the book of Yoshua is followed by the book of Shoftim. So just the same thing. Moshe gives to Yoshua to the Zikanim. And after them comes Shmuel, Hanavi, and other Nevi'im, Yechezkel, and Yirmiyahu, and all. They are then transmitted. And then it comes to the time period of the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, which is from the time period of Ezra. That's the time period where they come back from the exile in Babylon, and they come to rebuild the second Beit HaMikdash. So up until this Mishnah deals with the time period from Har Sinai, about 3,337 whatever years ago, up until the time of the later part of the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, which puts us at the end already after early days of the second Beit HaMikdash. So it's a huge amount of time. But so the Nevi'im, Zikanim were the people, the Shoftim. The Nevi'im, as I said, they were the Nevi'im. Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, I'll give you a little bit more information next time, but we kind of went into it before, but I want to end with one comment. So why three things, right? Why? They didn't say anything else. I mean, they existed for centuries, right? So, and we also have many things we do to this day from the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, such as Shmona Esrei. When we get to Shmona Esrei in Tefillah, there's a whole introduction just about Shmona Esrei and how it came into being, and how it became 19 instead of 18 brachot. So Judy went like this just now, and she's right. We will find a pattern throughout Pirke Avot, which is threes. What is the number after this? 1, 2. What's the next number? Very funny. It's a private joke here. Internal, not private. 1, 2. What's the next number? Why? Based on what? Maybe it's 20. Maybe it's 12. I just took 1 and 2, put them together. Now I have 12. There's no pattern yet. You only establish a pattern after 3 times, right? 1, 2, 3. Then you know the next number to be 4. Okay. Again, Fibonacci sequence, which I've mentioned before, also follows a very specific pattern. There's so much in quote nature that Hashem did when it comes to math that there's sequences. We also talk about a chazakah. If I have a piece of land, there's a piece of land, and I take hold of it, and I live on it, and I grossed up there for 3 years, and no one complains that, hey, that's my land, it's now mine, right? There's all kinds of things. So when we're talking about transmission of Torah, we're also talking about acquisition. You mentioned acquiring before, kinyan. And we're going to talk a little bit about that more, especially in the 6th chapter. So the idea of we are not just learning Torah, we want to acquire it. What's the difference? I can go to the store, I can go to the makol, and I can look, there's bamba, and there's pop, and there's cheese, and there's meat, and all. Well, cool. And I leave. What did I find out? That there's all the stuff there. It's not mine. To get it to be mine, I have to take it, pay for it, and take it home. So the same thing here. I can read Torah, I can learn. But how does it become part of me? I have to acquire it. And that's very much tied to Tanya, because then it becomes, that's why Talmud Torah is connected kulam because it becomes literally part of you. So different topic. Okay, so there's much more to talk about. No, they definitely acquire. Definitely. Question is, why those three things are they mentioning? We're going to talk about that. They're now laying down the foundation for the rest of the Sechet Avot.
Because Moshe received it. It was he transmitted it. It
Right.
doesn't say that they ever acquired that they. We know that he transmitted it. We don't know that they got it. It's like I can sit in class and you can teach me something.
Right.
But it doesn't mean
By the
acquired.
fact that, right, so very good. That kind of is going to answer why in the 4th chapter, once again, goes back to Kiblu and not Masar. We'll hold on to that question just a little bit longer. Okay. Bezrat Hashem, we will continue next week and get a little bit more into this first Mishne and go into the second one too. I hope. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah.
That's very good.